Hello all, this is Dr. Dave Maslach, and in this particular video, I really want to talk about life hacking, what exactly it is, and some recommendations of what exactly you can do with it. And I'm going to compare this with a different strategy, which I'm coining as life brute force. And it's really just thinking about how you can actually get ahead in life, which one is the most effective. These videos, I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I'm creating these videos for my reciprocity platform, the E is spelled with a 3, and this platform is essentially where I believe that everybody should be able to get feedback as well as to get their work double checked so they can become very prolific and be amazing in the long run. So what exactly is life hacking? Life hacking is essentially where you find different shortcuts and heuristics to speed up the amount of speed up the amount of output that you get from the amount of work that you do. So if you could think of yourself as having experiencing a trade-off between work and leisure, right? You can spend most of your time working and spend a little bit of your time doing leisure stuff, or you can figure out these life hacks, reduce the amount of time that you're working, and then spend more time with your leisure. There's kind of this trade-off that happens. We've been thinking about this stuff for a long time. It's not just a recent phenomenon where we talk about life hacking. Life hacking dates back until the early 1900s. And perhaps even much more beyond that, but Frederick Taylor was one of the ones that sort of popularized this idea, where he was a management scholar and he was pretty influential. And what he did is he went around to different factories and he did time studies. He recorded the amount of time that it takes to do a particular task, and then he figured out the ways to reduce the amount of time to perform that particular task, and he sort of optimized everybody's behavior as much as possible. Now, there's a lot of benefits to life hacking. We know that there's a lot of benefits to life hacking, right? It's kind of a fundamental thing in economics, that you can reduce the amount of effort, the amount of time, the amount of resources that you spend in any particular task. You can have more leisure by doing that. You can reduce the cost of doing any particular thing. It becomes much more cheaper. You can serve a lot more people when you do particular life hacks and apply it to yourself. Like, this is home economics, right? You can perform arbitrage. A lot of people don't really do any sort of life hacks. They don't do any sort of life upgrades in any sort of way. They simply overlook all these little tiny heuristics that you can do to speed up your life and to improve its particular performance, right? And so if that's the case, you can perform arbitrage. You can look for different tasks or different resources that are sort of undervalued, purchase those particular things and then sell them at a higher cost, or you can do those particular things and sell them at a higher cost. So what do I mean by that? If you think of working and you look around you, a lot of people are actually not really all that efficient at their job. And if you just simply are a little bit more efficient than everybody else, well, then you could get paid a little bit more. You can do a little bit more with what you're doing and maybe charge more for your services or something like that. You could get maybe a higher salary. Now, the problem with life hacking is that often it makes life seem really easy, and there's a lot of people that sort of sell and market life hacking in a lot of different ways. The problem is that life hacking is not really all that easy, and even if you're performing sort of life hacks and stuff like that, it's easy. It makes it really easy for you to flounder, because what ends up happening is that you think that you're going to optimize a particular thing and reduce the amount of effort that you do with this particular thing, but then you find out it's really difficult, and then you switch to something else, and then you switch to something else, and then you switch to something else. Because you're constantly looking for that shortcut, you're overlooking a bigger picture, and you're not finding something that you can actually get really good at. It also ignores sort of the term and the idea behind it. It really ignores the costs and resources in developing life hacks. They're really difficult to do, and they require a lot of time, and they're very resource intensive. They require a tremendous amount of work to develop the life hacks, right? So to get somebody to go around and focus on life hacks and to focus on what you're doing and reducing the amount of time that you're doing, you have to devote a significant portion of your time, say maybe it's 10, 20% of your time, thinking about these particular life hacks and thinking about and devoting time to those particular life hacks. So it's really, really resource intensive. And if you don't really acknowledge that, what's going to happen is you're going to get just frustrated and not work at these particular life hacks, or you're going to go to something else. Now, I am a proponent, and I'm coining this term. I'm going to focus on brute force methods. These brute force methods, I'm going to call this life brute force methods. This is a lot more of focusing on using your own experience and devoting just a tremendous amount of determination and will at pursuing a particular life goal. So why I'm focusing on this, in my experience, actually life brute force is a lot more effective strategy of just continuing to take steps, one on top of the other and one on top of the other towards a particular life goal, because it gets you to frame, it sort of changes the frame and focuses on your behavior in terms of pursuing a particular goal. It gets you thinking in terms of grit. It gets you thinking in terms of persistence. It gets you thinking of, just continuing to push through something a lot more than focusing on life hacks. Life hacks is a lot about these quick wins and focusing on figuring out ways to do quick wins. But in my experience, that is not the way that you actually get out ahead in life. It's a lot about the grind. That's why there is a story about the tortoise and the hare, that the hare is always focused on these sort of quick wins and ways to reduce the amount of time, but that the tortoise is the one that actually continues to persist and actually wins in the long run. So there's some tremendous advantages when you sort of focus on life brute force methods and focusing on not optimizing your life, but just kind of trudging forward towards a particularly large goal. Now, the first one is that you're going to sort of have a change in your mindset very quickly, and you're going to focus on the power of persistence. It's going to be a really wonderful experience that you're going to have, and acknowledge that there is a journey along the way. It is a long journey, but you're kind of okay with that, and you're going to focus on the sort of behavioral methods of or thinking of how do you continue to persist at something a lot longer, and you're going to focus on, like, this is actually kind of enjoyable. That's why people that have a much more of a transition in terms of losing weight, in terms of improving their own performance, in terms of maybe getting out of debt, in terms of saving money and having long run success in the long run, they focus on these very long run life brute force methods. It's not about, in terms of getting a very large retirement and having millions of dollars saved for your retirement, it's not about getting rich very, very quickly. It's about saving 10, 15% for your entire life and continuing to persist to do that. And that's how you actually get that's how you actually sort of get very wealthy in the long run, is pursuing on these things that take a long time. The other thing that really happens and that people ignore is that when you pursue these sort of life brute force methods, is that it attracts resources to you, because you are doing something that other people don't like to do, as well as it takes a tremendous amount of effort to sustain that for a long time. So people start to respect what you're doing, and they continue to look at what you're doing, and they're going to acknowledge that that actually is a very difficult thing to do, and it's going to be very attractive to do that, right? So getting out of a large amount of debt, for example, getting out of a large amount of school debt, if you have that, the journey of that, and you could tell that story, how you worked your way out of that. That is an extremely attractive story to tell, and lots of people really enjoy that story. The other thing, so a third thing to acknowledge, is that life itself is a lot of routine behavior. And you have to get very comfortable with just doing sort of brute force methods. This means getting yourself out of bed, making your bed every single day, and doing that mundane task every single day for a long time. That's how you actually excel in the long run, and you become a very decent human being. There is a lot of life is about the grind and filled with all these mundane little tasks. And I wish, so in terms of my school, in terms of what we teach in university, I wish we can teach this particular task that is really mundane. There's a particular idea that life is really mundane, and it's a lot about this routine stuff day in and day out, but it's really difficult to do that. And I do, it's one thing that I wish I can get better at in terms of teaching this sort of mundaneness, and that just being encompassed and loving that mundaneness of life, that's how you actually excel in the long run. You just have to be very embracing of all these things that are really mundane, because that's what life is. It's really about just grinding away. It's a lot of this sort of brute force method of just taking pleasure in all of these little tiny mundane things that happen to you every day. So for me, I just dropped off my kids. It was a really enjoyable process, and I was going through all of the spelling words and things like that with my kids. That's a really enjoyable process. It can seem like a grind. It's really difficult to do, right? Because we're getting on their case, but it really is a fun thing, and you have to enjoy that. The other thing that you have to get out of life and doing sort of brute force methods is that there is a tremendous amount of joy that happens with these particular mundane tasks, right? So this is taking a real focus on just enjoying life as you're going through the entire process. Now, the one thing that I also should point out, so this is probably the fourth thing that I should also point out, is that even if you're performing life hacking things, if you're trying to actually do life hacking, it implies, and what ends up implying is that the life hacking itself is going to become mundane. It's going to become very difficult. You're going to devote a significant amount of resources and time investigating these particular life hacks, and that becomes very difficult in itself, which becomes the mundane task, and you end up becoming a brute force sort of hacker at the life hacking. You kind of reduce that down into performing these particular tasks. So even if you're performing life hacking, you still have to do this life brute force method, right? So what are some kind of recommendations in terms of going forward, in terms of improving your life? I would, instead of focusing on life hacking, I really don't like that term, because it looks and it sort of suggests that everything's really quick and easy and fast, and things are snappy, and you're going to get really wealthy overnight and all that kind of stuff. That's not the way that you perform that's not how in the real world that we actually get very wealthy in the long run. There might be one or two people that get that out of thousands of people that actually pursue that particular strategy. But most people, it's a grind. You have to focus on that, and you have to focus on just figuring out how to just continuing to sort of persist in the long run, focusing on these brute force methods of continuing on and pushing through something. So the second thing that I would really love for you to do is take pleasure in all of this brute force stuff. There is tremendous amount of pleasure in life if you just look around and you enjoy that. This is a wonderful opportunity for me to tell the world, using YouTube, for example, talking on this electronic book, and having this communication, having this story told to the entire world. That is a really wonderful, amazing experience that I couldn't have done 10 years ago. That is really wonderful to actually focus on that. And once you start looking at all these particular things around you, you will be amazed. It will be the most wonderful experience of your life. It is also, so I teach a lot of stuff about creativity and innovation. You'd be surprised in how generative that entire process is. Once you start taking pleasure in the small little things, you start thinking about all the little other things that you can do to acknowledge and to build on that particular pleasure. It becomes extremely generative when you focus on that. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that you should just be enjoying every minute, right? Like, life is extremely short. And if you're focused on doing this life hacking and reducing the amount of time and effort that you're doing in absolutely everything, you're missing out on the bigger picture, that life is a tremendous joy and it should be celebrated. And looking at people as they grow older, that they should be celebrated, focusing on all this wonderful things that happen to you, and acknowledging that this grind, this life brute force, this focus on, saving every day, you know, doing something a little bit different, a little bit special for somebody every day, focusing on these little tiny things, focusing on just being a wonderful person in every little moment, that's going to get you a lot further. It's going to make you enjoy life. It's going to change your life tremendously once you start thinking about it in that way. And you're going to, naturally things will start to click that you would never imagine would click, because you're focusing on the life brute force and enjoying life brute force rather than life hacking. So if you like this video, make sure you do the old thumbs up, as well as you can leave some comments. I do appreciate all that stuff. And that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye.